Welcome to Church 3.0, presented by Apollos, a podcast where we explore the nuances of modern Christian culture and the challenges of cultivating community while maintaining impact and relevance in the church. Join Tyler Vance, COO of Apollos, as he talks to church leaders from around the world to gain a deeper understanding of the Christian faith in a modern context. Push boundaries, change lives, create a more hopeful future.
Hey, welcome today, guys. We've got an incredible guest for us today here at the Church 3.0 podcast, Matt Engel, who has a resume as long as anyone that we've had a conversation with, and it's his hands in many things. But one of the things that he has really centered and catered on his expertise is helping churches really take new ground through tons of different ways. He's got a ton of different expressions about that. Matt, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, my pleasure.
And thank you for investing some time with us. Anything
Absolutely.
you would say about your experience as we get into today?
Yeah, no, I'd say a mentor of mine described me as this weird individual that fits in the nexus of theology, data, and research. And I'm just kind of in that nexus of all three. I'm like, I'm not the best theologian. I'm not a data scientist, and I'm not a research scientist, but I fit in the nexus of all of that. So pastor for a long time in Phoenix and just love the local church. And we paid a bunch of dumb tax. So I think we're here to hopefully share some of the dumb tax that we're seeing and learning and paying so nobody else has to pay it.
Sure. I think there's some value in paying some dumb tax, and it doesn't matter. As a leader, we've all done it. And so you absolutely help churches lead with clarity using data. One of the things that I love is you help churches move beyond inspiration to intentionality. I think that's one of the places that data has such an important seat in the local church that we're really still on the precipice of unlocking, I think, from a greater scale. You're also not afraid to break stuff and learn fast. And I do think that's a unique spot in the church space. We hold things really tight. We want to have everything tested fully before we execute anything. And I think you bring a unique perspective and voice into that of encouragement to pastors.
Yeah, I think in church world we get lost in the idea that we think data and we think somehow that's not spiritual, right? And I think how I read scripture is, one, there's an entire book called Numbers, so clearly data matters at some point. Nehemiah, they had a census, for crying out loud, and they counted the number of donkeys, for crying out loud. So somewhere, somehow, data matters. But I look at scripture. One of my favorite Bible characters outside of Jesus is Solomon, and smartest dude on the planet asked for one thing, and it was wisdom. And what was wisdom? It was data. Really, it was a way in which to understand certain things that was good or not. And it was like, yeah, this is all meaningless under the sun from that perspective. And it was wisdom.
Yeah.
So I look at data and I almost try to help people think about it as wisdom more than just raw data. Because there's not a pastor on the planet that's going, I was good yesterday and I just want to be good tomorrow. It's like, no, I probably sucked a little bit yesterday and want to get slightly better than, tomorrow. And what does that require? It requires a level of wisdom.
Yeah. No, that's good. And I mean, I've said it so many times is, our old saying is data has a seat at the table. The Holy Spirit is still the head of the table. And you lead through that really well. One of the concepts that you have helped churches with in learning is the importance of micro journeys versus broader macro journeys. Can you explain what that means, and then what how that's applied in your context as you lead churches through that?
Yeah, and yes, on the micro journey, real quick, let me affirm what you were just saying. So I like to say Jesus was a priest, a prophet, and a king, and throughout Scripture, kings are the ones that cared about data, right? And so it does have a seat at the table because that is biblical. And then that other piece to this on the micro journey side, and where data informs that, is that we think in these big terms: get into a group, serve, invite your friend, give, all of those things. And what we uncovered at my church was really like, no, that happened Sunday. We had a group launch thing.
Yeah.
Well, the next Sunday, how many 6 days pass between the Sunday that we launched Get Groups and the Sunday that we're hoping that groups like take form and start moving into that direction. So what we did is said, man, that's like a big journey. That's a macro journey of this. Hey, we want you to start serving. And what we unpacked was actually the way in which to get somebody to serve is they need to pray for their neighbor 3 times. Like,
Mm.
that's the micro journey encompassing this other outcome. And the outcome happened to be, wow, a disproportionate number of people that prayed for their neighbor 3 different times over a week actually joined a group or started serving at a disproportionate rate than those that didn't. And that's
Mm.
a different way of kind of thinking about what we're trying to do. Like, we found if you can get somebody on mission with the church,
Yeah.
the rate at which they start being generous with their time and their funds is about 8x more than if you wait for if you just have somebody start giving. And so those are the things where I'm like, how do we start? The prophets knew prophecy based upon pattern recognition as I read scripture. And again, most people probably theologically might disagree with me, but that's what I look at is I'm like, yeah, they were looking at these patterns saying that this is the Messiah.
Mm.
And so I'm looking for those types of things. One of the things that we found, which is super practical, is that the people most likely to leave our church were single parents with multiple kids and a boy between 8 to 10. And so we looked at that pattern saying, man, this cohort of people, this segment of people are disproportionately disconnecting from our church. Okay, so now children's pastor, I'm going to you saying, hey, when you see a family that looks like this, let's love on them more. You're hanging out with your volunteers and trying to love on them, which is great. But we know from patterns that this segment of people are disproportionately more likely to unconnect from our church than any other segment out there. So let's make sure that they're honored, they're loved, they're cared for in that capacity. And that's the like these micro journeys that we're looking for to understand that this macro journey, yes, we want you to be in a group. Yes, we want you to serve. Yes, we want you to give. We want you to invite your friends. We want you to do all those things. But in the context of an unbeliever, that's a big bar of entry.
Mm.
And we don't think about it that way. We think, no, we told you to get into a group this Sunday, but oh, yeah, that's right. How many hours pass between the next Sunday that they show up to church? Those
Yeah.
are all the micro journeys that take place.
So I mean, obviously in your context, you've been in the game for a minute. Those are easy for you to identify.
Yep.
How do you lead pastors to begin to shape those and to identify those?
Yeah, you mentioned it earlier, but this idea of experimentation. Every church is different. You in your context, in your state, it's very different than in my context in Flagstaff, Arizona. And the climate is different. The entire metroplex is different in those different arenas. So
Sure.
what I like to say is let's experiment. And this is, I won't go too far, but it's like the end of the book's written, right? So we kind of know we win the game. Our accountability is to, are we helping people bump into Jesus while the time that we're here in that
Mm.
context? And so from me, it's like, hey, this might not be true in your context. That's okay, but at least test it and run an experiment that says, hey, I think what I've seen in churches that is fascinating is sometimes we think we have to be precise, and
Mm.
precision takes so much time, money, and energy. And what we kind of defaulted to was we were just looking to be accurate, knowing that no lives are going to be lost. Like, not Calvinistic, not running that far down the track, but the idea is like the end of the book's written. and no lives are going to be lost because we said this to this one group and we said this to this one group, looking at ways in which we can help advance their own spiritual journey to bump into Jesus. That was it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was okay.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in concept, let me say it like as simply as I can. If you're a pastor and you're going, I want to get someone in a small group.
Yeah.
And today, the way that you're doing that is sign up to serve in a small group.
Yeah.
You're missing opportunities to guide people to where they would be more spiritually responsive
That's right.
to joining a group.
That's right. Because what it could be is actually, if you want somebody to get into a small group, they have to experience what community is like. And
Sure.
so maybe it's actually, no, the first thing that we want you to do is actually start serving, which means in order to get you to serve, it's actually, we want you to pray for your neighbor 3 times, get you to serve. And then all of a sudden you see the power of community in a serving group going like, dang, this is on the weekend, I'm serving. But man, it'd be really cool to meet with somebody Friday night in a home and just
Yeah.
do life together.
Well, and you're also leaning in to digital ways to do this,
Yeah.
because I think digital introduces a
Oh.
lot of ability to do micro journeys. So what are the ways you're seeing churches use digital to help shape those journeys?
This to me is like the power of using tech. So I'm going to try to stay at a normal level, but let me say it this way: is technology is designed initially to actually pull out the weakest link in doing whatever you're wanting to do. Like
Mhm.
if they, let me, I'll explain it this way, right? Like we could go up on a mountain and carve some freaking words on a stone. It's going to take some time. We could fast forward and start writing things on scrolls. We could fast forward to the Gutenberg press. We could fast forward to faxes. We could fast forward to email. We could fast forward to text. What is that doing? It's actually pulling out the weakest link, which is us as people. Because I can, one person standing on up on a mountain with a stone, with a hammer, starting to chisel things around, like that's not necessarily quote unquote scalable. So technology is to try to scale certain things. And what I see churches that are winning is that we're using technology to actually bring the person back into the equation, not pull them out. Or in my language, we're using technology to re-intermediate the relationship, not disintermediate it.
Mm.
So how do we start to do this in the form of prayer? One of the most powerful things that we started doing at our church is we had, 1,000 prayer requests a month. And I got frustrated one day at staff chapel, and I asked our executive team and everybody, I was like, what are we praying for? And I was super frustrated because I was like, it seemed weird to me. Like, hey, I'm holier than you. You told us on Sunday, here's all the prayer things that are going on in my life. I want you to pray for them. And I'm like, this seems weird. It just seemed weird to me. So I looked at all the prayer requests, applied. And again, I'm not a researcher. I just applied a standard naming convention to everything. I popped it into a word cloud and said, here are the things that we're praying for. Now, I'm an expositor by nature. So verse by verse through books of the Bible is what I do. That's how I was trained. That's how I communicate. Well, the number one thing was health, and the number two thing was marriage. During a series, a season in which we were going through the book of Acts. So where do I cover marriage in the book of Acts? Ananias and Sapphira, and they both died for lying. So that's my pro-marriage talk of the number one, number two thing that's going on in our people's life is they're asking for prayer about marriage. I use technology to surface that to say, hey, why don't everybody join us in praying? And here's the prayer requests over the last 3 months that have come in. And we mobilized 9,000 people to become prayer warriors. They didn't have to show up on Monday at 5:30 in the morning and pray over every chair. Like, the group that we had that were on the quote unquote prayer team. We just used technology to say, hey, actually, we can re-intermediate the saint into the equation of doing ministry and say, there's 9,000 people in our church. Here are the prayer requests for last week. Why don't you all join us in praying for it? Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's how I view technology and digital is we, in our context in faith, we have to leverage it to bring people back, to bring the saint back into the equation, not pull the saint out. So if we can
Yeah.
do digital prayer, great. We're just helping equip the saint to do their job, which is ministry.
Well, I think the fast nature, the quick nature of being able to use technology to connect someone to a
Yep.
spiritual action, such as prayer, right?
Agreed.
And then I'm just like processing what you're saying in the context of what I get to see day in and day out. You think about a pastor says, "Man, I desire a deeper heart of generosity in my church."
Yeah.
Our data would say the micro journey to get there is prayer.
That's
When
right.
you move people to a heart of prayer, the data says they are more generous,
That's right.
right?
Yeah.
Which, if you zoom back out and go from a spiritual perspective, as I'm leading people spiritually, the way to get you to be more generous, the way to open your eyes to generosity is to be able to see yourself as not the most important.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
And so and there's obviously I'm doing injustice to all the spiritual things that go into
No, I know what you
the
mean.
heart of prayer, but that is a micro journey using
right.
technology to get to a macro experience we desire as pastors
That's
for
right.
our people.
Yeah.
One of the things that you've led through as we've partnered together is, man, just the idea to break things quickly, which scares many leaders in the local church today.
It does. It
Um,
does. I mean,
how I was just gonna ask, like, how do you balance like what I would say classically is churches operate in the commodity of trust,
yep.
and so I think that might be the linchpin of like why we want to make sure everything is good before we do something.
Right.
But your idea, how do you balance that? Break things quickly and trust that churches navigate through.
Yeah. So I I think there's two different vantage points. Again, at the abstraction level, and I'll get more practical, but at the abstraction level, we view the world largely through scarcity, which
Mm,
means everything that we do, we think we've got to own it, control it, govern it. We got to make sure it's all perfect. And 99.9%, we know exactly what's going to happen.
yeah.
And I've done this before and I've seen this work where it's like, but I operate in the mental model of abundance. And the mental model of abundance says, man, if I'm just accurate, not precise, it's going to be okay because no lives are going to be lost. The biggest thing that I'm going to get is I'm going to get the learning on behalf
Mm,
of what it is we're doing. But if you want me to take 6, 7, 8 months to build a new onboarding process to get people into a group, I'm going to go, man, that's 8 months too long. In 1 week, I could run multiple experiments over the span of days, and I could learn what wants to happen and help make that thing happen.
yeah.
And that's a different model than what we've been accustomed to and what we've grown up in is we've grown up in this model that says, "Hey, don't screw it up."
Mm,
And I'm like, I don't see that in scripture. Like, I see a bunch of ragtag people going like, "Hey, we don't know what we're doing, but you know what? We're going to trust in the Lord and his sovereignty, and we're going to go forward and learn how to reach different people for his kingdom."
yeah.
And so that's kind of where I'm like, and this offends people, so I'm going to say it and probably offend people, but it's like I hate there's no knowledge in the room. There's only hypotheses that need to be tested on the street.
Ooh.
And that's a really, really, really difficult thing for leaders to embrace
Mm,
because they went to school. What do you mean there's no knowledge in the room? I've got a seminary. I've got this. I've got this. So do I. And I'm sitting here going, yeah, there's really no knowledge in this room. There's a hypothesis. Great. Let's go test it out there and see if it works.
yeah.
And so, what would it look like for us as leaders to start actually holding accountable our staff and our teams to learning? So I say it this way, when
Mm,
I get asked this a lot, they're like, "Hey, if you were in charge for a day, what would you do?" I'm like, well, I'd retitle every single staff member on payroll, and I would rewrite their job descriptions. And here's what their performance evaluation would look like. So I'd rewrite everybody's job description to be like, you're the executive pastor. Great. You're the executive development pastor now that Matt's in charge. You're the children's pastor. You're the children's development pastor. So I'd architect into the system the word development, because that's actually pastorally our job. Scale
Mm.
saints, equip the saints, scale saints. The performance evaluation then to stay on staff at our church would include these 3 questions. Where did you innovate? What did you learn? Big key. So not just innovation for innovation's sake, and we're going to go blow a bunch of money, all that stuff. Where did you innovate? What did you learn? And then who are you developing?
Mm.
And that's how we architect into our systems this idea of experimentation and, more importantly, learning. We've got to get that learning back into the system so that we know, hey, we did that, and it didn't necessarily generate the outcome we were looking for. So, but this one did. So let's go double down on this approach.
So one of the I'm gonna push you on what you just said. You're obviously working with churches day in and day out. What's one of the things that you could give us an example of a church that's learned something by trying, failing, and then maybe iterating on that? What's a recent example of that?
So I'm going to give you 2. One on first-time guest retention,
Okay.
and then I'll give you one on giving. One is the first-time guest experience. What we found is most communicators from the state, including me, I'd be like, hey, if you're new here, go to our welcome table. We've got a gift for you. Welcome to blah, 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 blah. And we're going to throw up on you. What we did is we actually split test. We had a bunch of churches continue to do that motion, and then we had a bunch of churches actually pivot to honoring the second time guest or the returning visitor or returning guest. And what we said is, hey, if this is your first time here, we love you, we're thankful for you, and we hope you join us again. Second time guests, when they come back, it's like, hey, if this is your second time here, we'd love for you to go to the table, meet with some people, get plugged in. If you can get them from visit 2 to visit 3, they'll retain on their own at about 68% nationally. All because we shifted our approach and saying, hey, you keep doing what you're doing, first time guest matters. But really, it's actually the returning guest that matters more. And if you can go from 2 to 3, and that's when you want to give them everything, right? Visit 1, they were still dating you. They're probably going to throw away the mug, right? They didn't like the way that you talked. They didn't like the tattoo that you had on your arm, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
Or in my context, they didn't like because I was preaching in shorts and flip-flops. It's like, oh, you must not love Jesus. I'm like, these are Jesus sandals, for crying out loud. Anyway, but that was what we were doing, is we were split testing a first-time guest. The other piece then was generosity. And what we found is we had a bunch of churches that continued to do their motion. Hey, we're a generous church, give here. Hey, if you're new here and you don't feel compelled, don't worry about it. But here's what we did is we actually were like, hey, we're not going to dismiss you if you're new to being generous. If you're new here, we are a generous people because God was generous in his context for us. Therefore, we're not placating you and dismissing you out of this exercise. Because the fundamental question, and you hit it earlier, and that's where I was going with this, is it's all about trust. And so what we had a boatload of churches do is say, hey, and if you don't trust us right now, that's okay. Here's a local nonprofit that we encourage you to be generous to, because it's all about trust. If you don't trust us here today, that's okay. But we're not going to dismiss you from being generous with your funds to expand the kingdom, to do good in that context. And so those 2 things disproportionately led to the macro journey we were looking for. But the micro journey was like, actually, no, let's route them to a local nonprofit and support them. Who cares? Great. We're good. And disproportionately, we're building trust with them, going, no, this is a vehicle and an agent for change and for good in my community, and I can trust them.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are great. Let me ask the super practical question. how do pastors respond to that? I mean, obviously you're talking about stage communication. You're talking so many things being touched by that. How did you lead through that organizational change?
Yeah, here's what I've seen is it's actually a generational thing. I
Mm,
would argue that my boomer pastors, my boomer friends, they're they're they were brought up for 35, 40 years in an
yeah.
approach of ministry, and getting them to tweak back to this different model,
Mm,
it is a challenge. I would say I have more luck with our Gen Z, or sorry, Gen Xers and then younger. The Gen Xers still kind of toggle between it. They're like, "No, I've grown up in this model that says
yeah.
I'm the communicator and you need to do what I say." And I'm like, man, that used to work. Just like it used to work based upon the size of the brand or the size of the building. Well, now it's no longer about the size of the brand and size of the building. It's about 100,000 strangers that say this thing is actually worth buying. My wife exclusively shops on Amazon by ratings alone, not by brand or by size.
Mm,
So trust is now distributed. And so what's happening is you're seeing this model where you've got older older pastors that have grown up accustomed to, no, trust is centralized into the system. And the bigger the brand, the more I can trust it. And that broke. And so you're having this tug of war between this next generation that's like, no, I don't need the car to be yellow and have a fare and have safety glass and have the phone number that says 555 and all this other stuff for me to get into a vehicle to get from point A to point B. I can actually pull up my phone and get into a car with a stranger, which we used to say was hitchhiking, and no one ever did it,
and you
right?
didn't pay for it.
And you didn't pay for it. And so that's the idea, is like, actually there's just two mental models that have collided,
Yeah.
and we're seeing some of that emerge. And so it really comes down to their openness of this new mental model that's emerging. All the same players are there. It's their willingness to embrace, do I want to be Kmart and Sears and shopping
Mm,
malls, or do I want to be potentially Amazon?
yeah.
And they're in this tug of war that I can't that all I can do is expose it and then hopefully see their willingness to jump in or jump out based upon that exposure.
Yeah. No, you're that's well said. One of the ways our worlds converge is through app, and you've talked in our conversations as we've worked with clients together about split testing inside of apps. So I'm gonna shift and turn for a second, because I really want you to talk about this as a moment to teach others a mindset shift. Much of what you just said. We've got worlds that are colliding, and so what is split testing inside of an app, and
Yeah.
what does it look like in the context of a church?
Yeah, so split testing is just taking a subset group of one and the other and doing what 7th grade science asked us to do back in the day. Create a hypothesis and test it, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, seriously, that's all. I mean, I hate to say it, but that's what we're calling all of our friends back to, is like, let's go back to 7th grade science and
Yeah.
pretend that we don't know X or Y. And so we're going to say, does water boil at this temperature or this temperature? Well, we're going to test both and see what happens. So in this idea within the app, it's like, hey, are there segments of people that we can and hear me, I'm not talking about disproportionate giving more value to one group over another. What I'm talking about doing is giving equal value to both, said slightly differently, to resonate maybe with that current segment. So I'll give you an example that always gets me in trouble, but it's like, hey, some of you need to hear we all fall short of the glory of God. We say that all the time in church. Some of you need to hear we all suck at something. We don't really say that in church. But that's probably what the non-believer millennial male's actually feeling. And so in that context, could we say those two things to segmented people and see what actually happens based upon that initial segmentation? And the beauty of tech is we can do that with like a click of a button. it doesn't require
Yeah.
any additional work,
Yeah.
right? It just requires a level of thinking going, hey, if I said this to my boomers and this to my millennials, do I get any different variance based upon what I said? Because I'm saying it in their context for them, not spraying and praying everybody
Yeah.
the same message.
I'll share an example of this really practically and both embarrassingly and fun. In previously, one of the things that we did is we looked at the average first time gift of someone. And so in our giving experience, in the previous organization I was in, we uh, put in kind of a grayed out area uh, a target amount that was in line with the average first time gift. And then we ran a second test at the same time. So, historically, we've called this A/B testing, right? With no dollar amount grayed out. So they still had to enter a physical amount, but we just kind of subtly in the background suggested something. And the test that we suggested a dollar amount that was in line with our first time giving, from a percentage point, those gifts actually decreased.
Interesting. Interesting.
Which was a fun meeting to be a part of. But it was one of those, like, that was a hypothesis we were testing, and we got great data out of it and made strategic direction. And then we also, the secondary thing that you didn't talk about, we had more confidence in the decision we made as a result of that.
Agree.
And so the next decision we got to, it was, well, let's do this again. And then we can carry that confidence forward. You didn't talk about that, but I think that's an intangible thing that we're also are missing out on.
I would say more and more of the churches that I work with now are actually doing this, where they have what they call their largest volunteer team at their church is now called the Ministry Innovation Team.
Mm-hmm.
They never step foot on Sunday to serve. They're not ushers. They're not parking lot people. They're not in childcare. They're the Ministry Innovation Team. And what they're doing is they're actually the focus group for the church. So we have fun things like, hey, what would your non-believing friend prefer as far as a beverage goes over the summer services that we're doing? We give lemonade. What flavor would they like?
Yeah.
Right. And we're asking this group of volunteers now to provide us feedback to help co-create ministry versus somebody sitting up there going, well, I went to seminary and I have my doctorate and I have this degree and I know what the non-believing friend of you, Tyler, I know what your non-believing friend wants. They want raspberry. And you're like, no, you don't know my non-believing friend. I do. And I'm telling you, church, they want strawberry lemonade. Right. So that's the big shift here is we've been kind of afraid of getting feedback for fear that we're getting the minor thing of the 2% of the people that were mad because I said suck on the stage. When in all reality, 85% of the people left fulfilled and loving it and are going to bring their friend next weekend.
Ooh, Matt, dude, I might get on a soapbox, so I'm going to try not to. The thing I love about the concept of split testing is it puts the end user at the center of the conversation. And there are so many tools out there that are catered to selling to pastors, and they meet pastors' needs, but they don't actually meet the needs of the end user, the attendant,
That's right.
the person we're trying to reach.
That's right.
Split testing breaks that barrier.
Yep.
And gives them a voice in the thing that we're delivering them.
And it creates these mental in the business world or in the franchisee world, it creates these mini owner operators.
Yes.
They're now bought in to going, no. Again, Matt Engel's church just asked Tyler Vance and the Ministry Innovation Team, hey, here's option A or option B. What do you think your non-believing friend would prefer over summer series that we're doing as
Yeah.
far as beverages go? Well, when you say, I know my non-believing friend and he'd prefer strawberry over raspberry, you just co-created with me, and now you own a little bit more of the mission of my church. And as soon as you create contribution over consumption, which is what we were designed by God to do. Think about it. Genesis, right? Adam was put in the Garden of Eden to contribute value into something that was already perfect.
Yeah.
So we're asking for you to contribute into the equation. And the difference is we're not recruiting to a chore, we're unlocking your passion, which your passion is your non-believing friend. You want them to be in heaven with you.
Golly. All right. You also, and I've heard you process this. And I'm going to shift you just another 10 degrees again. The curated versus content. Curated experiences versus content.
Yeah.
Very much that same tension. How do you approach that?
We not everybody does, but we had one graphics person on our team that did all of our images, that did all the stuff and made everything look good. And one day I came up to him and I was like, "Hey, how did you come up with that?" And he's like, "Oh, well, this was my inspiration and I heard this from your sermon and I heard this and your outline. So here's," and I'm like, "Yeah, but you didn't ask anybody who doesn't believe in Jesus about that." And he was like, "No." And I'm like, "I love you. And I love that you went to school and you've got all of the credentials
Yeah.
and it says that you are good and gifted. But I don't really care if you like it or if our church people like it. I care if the non-believing friend likes it."
Ooh.
And that's because that's what I'm after. Yes, I totally get both sides of the coin, but we were a disciple maker making church, not just a disciple making church.
Mm.
And so that was that kind of paradigm, that shift that we were starting to make of like, it's okay that you like this. Let's go back to the experiment. Let's go test it. What do you think, Tyler, your non-believing friend would like as far as the image goes for the book of Matthew that we're going through? This one or this one? And we're going to get that feedback from Tyler. He's contributing to the system. So now he's a little bit more bought in to the church. And what's he probably going to do? He's probably going to go invite his friend John, who's his neighbor, saying, "Hey, we're going into this new series and I think you might like it."
Yeah. My good friend Matt Welty says, non-church people are not looking for church content.
Right.
But they are looking for these curated experiences that they're able to be guided through.
And here's the thing is we think that it has to be novel and we have to Cedar Creek, great church, right? I was
Great
with
church.
them a long time ago. And one of the things that we were riffing through was I was like, look, more and more people want a co-created or curated experience because they don't trust you and they don't trust your brand. They trust 100,000 strangers that say, "I can trust you." And so in that same motion of creating, split testing and images, et cetera, it's like, actually, there is power in saying that, no, the divorce rate was never 50%. According to Shanti Feldhahn, it was this percentage, and da, 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 da. All I'm doing is co-creating a point in scripture, and I'm backing it up with other places that they can say, "Hey, if you don't trust me, trust this, trust this, trust this, trust this." And that's a different model than what we're accustomed to because we want to spend most of our time creating things. And I'm like, and what Cedar Creek said, and I loved it, is I suggested, I was like, look, I think you guys should be at like 75% co-creation or curation and 20, 25, 30% creation. And Ben actually pushed back and he was like, actually, I want to be at like 90-10. I want to be 90% curation and 10% creation. And it's a different model than what we're accustomed to. We think, no, we need to create everything. And I'm like, there's nothing new under the sun.
No.
So let's co-create it. Let's curate it into the process. And all we're doing then is saying, hey, you might not trust Matt Engel, and it's okay. But
It's completely okay.
Here, and here are actually validating the same thing. So don't trust me, go to them.
Great. We could talk for, there is so much. We are at 100,000 feet elevation, and there is so much to dig into and dive into. We don't have time to do that today. One big encouragement or thought for pastors that you would desire, if you had a prayer for the local church, what would be the elements you would include in that?
I would say pastors are asking for wisdom, but they haven't architected into the system a mechanism to gain wisdom. So it's like they're waiting for the Holy Spirit to come speak to them, and the audible voice of God might speak to some people. That's great. Unless you architect it into the system, you're probably not getting the feedback that is actually out there waiting, and it's being said in homes. It's just not being said to you because you haven't architected into the system to gain that feedback back.
That's
And
good.
you're afraid
That's
that you
good.
might get the 2% that didn't like it. And I'm like, that's 2%, guys. Architect into the system to gain 98% of the feedback, and you'll find a lot of validation in what we're doing.
That's good. That's good. Let me hit you with some quick fire questions as we end today, and I thank you for your time. Most underrated metric churches should track.
Underrated metric that churches should track is what what I call involvement in ministry. We don't measure involvement in ministry because we don't really care what happens Monday through Saturday. And I do. I care more about what happens as a catalyst of the weekend or my life group than I do what happens in my life group or on the weekend.
Yeah.
What did those two things catalyze?
Matt Engel's source of inspiration outside of the church world.
I'd say my family, my wife, default switch is there. They encourage me, so that's my go-to spot where they encourage me to keep learning and keep doing. So
great. And if you had a dream car in your garage, what would it be?
It's a good question. Probably a Model T.
Interesting.
I growing up as a kid, I wanted an XJ220 Jaguar. But now as I've grown older, I'm like, there's something nostalgic about the old classics. And I'd say that Model T is just, it brings me back to my roots of knowing what it was like back then.
Gotcha. I was not expecting that. So Matt, thank you so much for your time today.
My pleasure too.
And we'll have links for if you were spurred to curiosity or desire for further action. We'll have links to get a hold of Matt and allow you to engage at a deeper level. Matt, sounds like we're going to have to do this again and maybe get just a layer deeper, maybe a practicum on how to do some of the stuff. You've shared so many challenging concepts to the local church today. Thank you so much for your time and your investment.
My pleasure, Tyler. Thanks for having me, man.
Thanks.